And hi, how are you today?
Hi, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course, and so happy to have you. I'm really excited to learn more about real-time rescue and especially the Word on the Street program. So let's just
Yeah,
go right into it. Tell me all about real-time rescue and Word on the Street and just let's get into
great.
it.
Sure. Yeah. So, Real Time Rescue is a 501c3 nonprofit animal welfare organization that is based in Southern California and mainly works within the communities of LA County, Orange County, as well as the Morongo Basin, High Desert area near Joshua Tree and 29 Palms. And the mission of Real Time Rescue has always been to focus on both the dogs and the communities that are most misunderstood and therefore underrepresented and frankly the most vulnerable populations that we come in contact with in dog rescue. We do that in two ways mainly. The first is through our foster to adopt program. Many of your viewers will know rescues have dogs. They have,
They fosters and they, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a revolving roster of about 10 dogs. We're a relatively small rescue in that vein. But those 10 dogs tend to come from either owner surrender or through in the shelter system. We pull them from the shelter system. Sorry, I feel like I'm totally like all nerves.
You're fine. You're fine. Again, like we can clip this out. Like it's all good. No worries.
Do you mind if I just like start over really quickly and then there'll be more conversation? I just want to like get this part right. It just
absolutely, yeah. Okay. And I can help too by kind of like if you want, you can say the mission of real time rescue, and I say, okay, how do you accomplish that? So I can kind of help little directional questions, like open ended. So if you want, just say one little blurb, and then I can come in and just kind of like bring us to the next one.
Okay, great. So the main mission for Real Time Rescue has always been to work both with dogs and in communities that we have found are the most misunderstood and therefore underrepresented and frankly, the most vulnerable populations that we come in contact with. And we do that in two ways. One is through our foster to adopt program, in which we have about 10 in our revolving roster of dogs that are currently in foster homes or in a trusted boarding facility. And those are the types of dogs that are looking for permanent homes. They're looking for the right match in an owner or a family. But those dogs in particular, we are rescuing and pulling dogs from shelters that have been overlooked due to extreme medical conditions and or behavioral issues. And the behavioral issues are not limited to, but definitely include dog altercations, bites with on both a human or a dog, severe separation anxiety, things like that a typical rescue just doesn't have the ability to bring that dog in.
And those are actually the most common behavioral reasons that people will give up dogs. Yeah. And tell me about the second mission that Real Time
Rescue. And the second way is through our Word on the Street program that you mentioned earlier. And this is a program that is really close to my heart, and it's something I'm extremely passionate about. And that's mainly because there aren't many rescues that are doing this, have this as a part of their mission. And it's something that I feel speaks directly to overpopulation and euthanization in shelters. And that is we work within low-income communities as well as with individuals that are experiencing homelessness to support their animals. So many people that are living on the street or don't, are living paycheck to paycheck, their animals are part of their family. I have met people who will feed their animals before they feed themselves, who are...
Definitely in Southern California, we experience a lot of homelessness here. And I agree, I see the same. And what do you guys do? And you also help low-income families, you mentioned. How do you help them?
Yeah. So, oftentimes it's easiest for me to explain something and give you kind of an example of a dog. So there is a dog named Oscar, and he lives near the 29 Palms area. And somebody had called animal control because they noticed that he was living outdoors. And in the 29 Palms area, it can snow. It gets very, very cold at night. And during the summer, it is extremely hot. It is not a place where dogs should be living outdoors. And because the founder of our rescue has a really close relationship with animal control there, they actually reached out to her and said, would you be open to doing a welfare visit with us and just let's check in on this dog and see what's going on there. And when we arrived, it turned out that this was a single mother of 3 kids who was doing the best she can. She had just lost her job, and she was just about to go sell something in order to buy Oscar dog food. And so once you get into the home of somebody who's struggling to make ends meet, and you realize they don't know any better, they're just trying to do the best for the dog and for themselves and for their kids, keep a roof over their head. When they found out that we would gladly buy his dog food for them, buy a dog house, buy some dog beds, make it so that he's comfortable and warm, start to talk to her about what Oscar was experiencing outside, really educating her on what happens when a dog is left out for that long, and, you know, things that we could do in order to help. If he needs training, we could help her with training to bring him inside. So we started to build a relationship with this woman, and she's able to keep Oscar. She's able to keep him well fed. She's able to keep him warm. And all it took was a little bit of donations for food and
some education.
Education. Yeah. But even beyond that, it's the understanding. It's really a person going to a person and not judging them because they have their dog outside, but really talking to them about dog ownership and dog safety and what resources that are available out there.
I think a lot of people forget that not everybody has the advantage of growing up with that knowledge and that understanding of what's considered dog ownership. There's also a lot of, cultures that don't have the same as us. And so absolutely, I am such a huge advocate for just education and judging, not judging, like staying calm and remembering that it's still a human, it's still, someone who obviously cares. And I think that a lot of us are so used to the terrible, unfortunate situations such as Michael Vick, or the horrible stories that we hear on the news of dogs being, unspeakable things done to them, that it's almost like we're immediately jumping the gun on the wrong people.
Yeah. And, there's another example. There's, a family that somebody had called us and said, there's a dog, he's chained to a tree 24/7. His name is Moose. And he's chained to a tree 24/7. Maybe we should knock on their door and find out what's really happening here. And after talking with the family, and we found that they couldn't bring Moose into the house because there's 2 little dogs and they don't get along, and they feed him. They just simply don't know what else to do. And so in that particular case, they surrendered Moose to us. We brought him into our foster. He's currently in a foster home right now. But then my favorite part about this story is that I think maybe a month or 2 had gone by. And in that time, they had been communicating with us about their little dogs. What flea meds do you recommend? One of them just did this. What do I do if there's a tick on them? Or, they saw the transformation and in Moose and the understanding and the humanity of the volunteers, that they really opened up and asked for more help. And that means that those 2 little dogs are going to have a much better life. And in addition to that, a few months after that, they called us because a family member had dropped off another dog, and they didn't know what to do with him. And he was a big dog. So we swooped in. Instead of having him go outside to replace Moose, we were able to bring him up to a no-kill shelter in the Morongo Basin that we have a really good relationship with. And he was adopted within, I think, a month, and he's in an awesome home with a rad guy. He goes to work with him, gets to do whatever, he's really living like the best dog life. And none of that would have ever happened if we hadn't gone in with humility and understanding and said, how can we help? We just want to help you. It's about the dog. It's not about me judging you for your decisions. It's not about me saying you don't have enough money to have a dog. It's not about any of that. It's just about how can we help you help this dog? And we find that starts to grow our sphere of influence, because once somebody trusts you, they let a friend know that we're to be trusted. And that is really how you start to really see the exponential change.
Love that. I love that. And that is such a huge component of Best Life, is we want to educate people and kind of take away that judging and shame and guilt of the dog rescue world and put it into more of a light of, do you have a question about rescue dogs? Like, maybe I can answer, I can send you to someone who does. Do you, when people say, I've had people tell me like, oh, did you make this simple for rescue dogs to warn people to not come up too fast, or, things. And it would be very easy for me to get upset at them for giving into the misconceptions that society's created about rescue dogs. But all that would have done is make it worse. Yeah, then I'm right. That's why you created it. So instead I said, oh no, it's actually opposite. And we had a very nice conversation and friendly and respectful. 3 months later, they rescued a dog instead of going to the breeder that they were going to.
That's amazing.
Bad breeder. Yeah. So it's just, I love that you guys are taking that initiative and going in there with that respect of humanity and almost sort of leaving the human emotions out of it and focusing on the dogs. And that's what it's about. It's the dogs, it's not about our pride or what we think or what we, want. Of course, all of us want this glamorous life for dogs, but sometimes it's just better if they stay in their home, but yet with people who are learning. Yeah, and it's just so great. It's so amazing. So tell me more about the Word on the Street program and how you help homeless people. We've heard examples of how you help people with low income or, maybe not as educated or aware. Let's talk about how you help people truly living on the streets with their dogs, because it's common. It's so common. And it's amazing that you guys are helping.
Yeah. So I think to step back a little bit, the women that run Real Time Rescue and that have started Real Time Rescue, we're doing a lot of advocacy in homeless communities throughout their whole life. I mean, I've been volunteering in those types of communities since I was in high school, and both the founder and the VP. That really was instilled in all of us sort of as we were raised, and to be of service and to not be judgmental and to really look at somebody who might be experiencing homelessness as a person that is the same as a person who has a house. They're just people. And the more that you treat them with respect and you're able to see them and give eye contact, you really start to not be able to ignore those communities as you pass them on the street. And so I think that it's important to understand that Real Time was really based on these values of the women that were putting it together. And so this was just sort of this was always at the top of our priority list as far as really working within these communities that are.
And that's the Word on the Street program is what's at the top of this. Sorry. Okay. Just
so besides the Foster to Adopt program, which as a rescue, is normal stuff that people know, it was just as important for us to invest a good amount of our resources, our volunteers, into the communities that we are seeing that are living in tents and encampments throughout. A lot of that outreach is mainly in Los Angeles County and in the Morongo Basin. So through the Word on the Street program, we are in these communities passing out not just food, leashes, collars, bowls, blankets, beds, crates, wee pads, anything that are the typical things that you might think that somebody who doesn't have any income may not be able to afford for their dog. But for us, it's not just about the supplies. We're really looking to get into the communities and make sure that we are staying within the communities. So the dogs that are in our Word on the Street program are checked on often. We don't just give somebody a bag of dog food and say, see you later. We check back in with them and say, how are things going? what vaccinations do you need? Does your dog need to be spayed or neutered? We've helped, there was a woman with a dog that had a huge abscess, a German Shepherd that had an abscess on her mouth, which made it so that she couldn't eat. So we raised thousands of dollars to have that abscess removed so that she could have a life where she was able to eat and drink and be comfortable. So lots of veterinary care as well, and not just the big surgeries, but the preventative stuff. We want to make sure that puppies are getting all of their vaccines. We want to make sure that dogs that need to be spayed or neutered are getting spayed or neutered. In addition to that, we've also started to work with other nonprofits and community leaders in order to get even deeper into these communities. So there's a nonprofit called Brown Bag Lady, and she does food service in communities all throughout Los Angeles. And we started a relationship with her so that we can provide her with dog food and supplies that she can hand out along her route. And then as she hands things along, she recommends us to the dogs that really need help, and the owners that might need help with training or might need help with really anything. We're open to whatever that relationship brings, and we're not going to let anybody go to the wayside. If you need our help, we're here to help you in whatever way you need, whether that be veterinary or supplies. But for me, it's like you're
kind of creating a community within. Yeah, like a safe space.
Exactly. So we're kind of creating. We're trusted individuals in a community, and the reason why that's so important, I'll if you don't mind, I'll tell you another story.
Tell me more about, and I'm kind of thinking, because there's this, they're living on the street that's not safe, and it's like making me like so heart touched, because imagine not having a safe space anywhere. You're homeless, you're on the street, especially LA. It's not this safe life, and for people to come and not only say, here are these things, but to care and to be that safe haven, that warm, good feeling. It's incredible. It's incredible.
About being, there are so many people that are experiencing homelessness that are just completely ignored. And many of them have animals for protection, but even more so than that, they have them for companionship. I mean, especially with COVID, sometimes it's the only affection, only touch, only companionship that somebody has. And having had a wonderful relationship with a dog myself, I know that can be life-saving.
And it's mutual. And, I've seen I worked in veterinary medicine, and we would have programs come in, and the dog and the human would be separated. And not only would it be hard on the human, but they at least knew they'd come back. The dog was really upset, so I want to kind of also emphasize out there that, I've heard a lot of people say, we need better for the dogs, and the dogs want to be there. The dogs, that's their human, that's their love. They're,
Yeah. And I think that's a common misconception. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to understanding a person that is living on the street. And there's so much of our bias and politics and things that come into view that when you focus on the animal, you start to be able to focus on something that really you're connecting, there's a connection there, because I am connecting with you about your animals that's beloved to you. And that is like a family member, So I feel like those connections that we've made, and the connections that our volunteers have made in those communities, is really special, because it really shows that someone can be trusted. And I think that for someone who is as vulnerable as someone who, lives in a tent under a freeway underpass, having one person that they can trust has their back, that's, again, it can be life-changing. I mean, there are the stories that we've been a part of are just, you really start, again, to really see the humanity.
Can you share an example? I know you're going to share a story. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So, there was a dog named Dog. So that's his full name is Dog. And, he was living with his owner on the street. And we had found out about them through Brown Bag Lady, who we had gone out on a Sunday service. She was doing food distribution and our volunteers were going around talking to people with animals. And we came upon this really adorable gray and white, big kitty boy. And, we were offering food and she just broke down and said, basically, I know that something's going on, something's wrong with him. And his testicles were just inflamed and huge. And he couldn't sit down and he was really uncomfortable and she just didn't know what to do. So we swung into action. The next day he was at our vet. I think it was close to $2,000 worth of surgery. When they had him under, they found other masses that needed to be removed. He ended up having to stay at the vet for about 2 weeks. And during that time, she was so vulnerable without him, without having that sense of protection. But she knew we were doing the right thing and she knew that DOG needed this surgery. And we worked with some other community advocates through an advocacy group called Street Watch LA. And they were able to transport his owner to visit him at the vet and do just the normal dog things that you would do if you had those resources. This is a woman who doesn't have access to a full-time phone or email, or any of those things. So like the people that are there on the street to help her get to those places, they're really part of the project too. And so DOG all healed up, goes back to mom, doing great. Probably 2 weeks later, we get a call from the same encampment, but from a different guy. And he had gotten our number from DOG's owner. And what had just happened in their encampment was someone had come through with a knife and had stabbed 2 dogs and was running after the people in the encampment. And it was really awful. But we were the first person they called. And for me, that was just huge because they knew, hey, this is somebody who's going to come in. They're not going to judge me. They're going to get my dog help. They're here for me. I trust them. And for me, that was a turning point because it was being part of the community and being called to really rescue 2 dogs literally bleeding out on the street. We took one of them, unfortunately passed away, but the other one we took to the vet and we continue to check on her. She often stays with the woman who runs Brown Bag Lady when her owner needs to go do something else. He's currently getting into a sober living situation where we set up his dog that did survive with all the vaccinations and paperwork so that she can be homed with him. And none of that would have happened if we hadn't taken the chance on DOG. And that series of events has really shown me how big of an impact just one act of kindness can really be. And how important it is because it's not just about the dogs, even though that's our main focus. It's really about making sure that the humans have what they need in order to give those dogs a good life. And for us, a good life doesn't necessarily have to be one in a mansion. As long as the relationship between the human and the dog, that's always the most important for us. The care and relationship between those individuals is really key for us.
Yeah, I have to say, I've seen, all like owners of financial, status and things. And the dog, there's no like happier dog because they're here and, they're happier when you can tell that there's that love, that bond.
The bond.
Yeah. And dogs know, they know like, hey, this lady's feeding me first, and I can't tell you how many times I've also myself in San Diego used to go out and hang out with socks during the winter time and food and things. And I remember I handed one man, his meal and he walked over and I heard him telling someone how he hadn't eaten in 4 or 5 days. And I watched him give his dog first and he only got this little piece. And I'm like, there's no way I'm like, this my meal. I think it was like, I had like,
right.
I was like, please take it, and so it is hard as, of course, like dog lovers and someone who admittedly, my dogs are like ridiculous, like it's, what they eat and like, they have cooked food, all this kind of like stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have been able to put that aside and think, I've seen dogs separated from their owners, even if it isn't like the life that we believe they should have. And that is heart wrenching. And I've even seen dogs that are older and they're already, unfortunately not super healthy because they are living on the street and they are separated from their owner and they pass away. So there is that, love of the dog as well. And I kind of almost feel like that's not emphasized enough, but like the dogs want to be there too. It's not just the humans that want to be there.
Right.
And I feel like you guys are putting that word out there. You're showing people. Yeah,
we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. But I mean, just one act of, like you said, one act of kindness and it's growing. And I just wish that more, like I wish we could take word on the street and build like a, center and then be like a center in San Diego and a location here and just start spreading it. And, I believe that people like you, the work that you're doing, the more and more that it gets out there, it'll inspire others. And again, that's kind of what Best Life is all about, is inspiring others, not even just to rescue, but to kind of have that different, like, mind flip switch, that paradigm shift, of that mentality.
Absolutely.
And it's just, it's so incredible. Thank you for sharing this story. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. Totally.
And the fact that you guys check in on them like consistently.
Yeah. It's really important that we go back. There's, if you go on our website, you can click on Word on the Street, see more about our program. And then there's a link so you can see a lot of the dogs that we do help. And you'll see regulars in there. There's Gordo, there's DOG, there's, who else? All kinds of dogs that you'll see, little update about Tudor's a puppy. Little update about this dog. We're always staying in contact with them because, again, it's more about that relationship and really making sure that dog, that we're not just dropping a bag of food and running. That it's more than just food distribution.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really amazing. And also, I will add quickly that on that same page where people can keep up with the dogs, if they donate, they can also, it's really cool. They can keep up and they can see, my donation is going towards something. And I think that's really big, nowadays, unfortunately, with, donations and scandals of donations and things like that. I would highly recommend anybody watching this to consider donating to the Word on the Street program.
Thank you. Yeah.
Donate too. And you can see what your money is going to. I think that's really a great idea. It's amazing.
Yeah. We also have opportunities to, we have a couple wish lists. So, if you're an Amazon junkie, you can send dog food that will go to our Word on the Street. You can send toys to go that will go to dogs that are, living outdoors. And we also have a couple wish lists for some rural shelters. So both the Morongo Basin Shelter as well as the Barstow Shelter are no-kill shelters that don't get a lot of foot traffic and don't get a lot of funding. But if you want, you can send them some blankets right through our website. So we try to make, there's a way for anybody to give. If you'd like to volunteer your time to work within these communities, we have volunteer applications. And if you've got a skill and you want to help, just let us know because we're really open to opportunities and ways to help.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. I love, I want to keep talking about Word on the Street, and we're probably going to have you guys back on again. Just to
and Word on the Street is my jam. So that's where I'm going to have the most, information, and that's really the closest to my heart.
That's really awesome. And it seems like, kind of going into preventing pet relinquishment and working, like you mentioned, the low income families. How you guys have, helped them keep their dogs or keep dogs out of the shelter and just, go to another home, things like that. Seems like you're pretty kind of on that track of preventing the dogs from being given up or surrendered in your life. Do you want to kind of go into and explain how you sort of got into dog rescue in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. So I didn't grow up with dogs. My first dog, I think I was 20, maybe. English Bulldog, didn't know.
Oh man, for a first dog, that's like,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, didn't know anything from anything. There were many tearful days of why aren't you walking, or like I just figured everything out the hard way. That was, I didn't. It wasn't like I was a super dog person. I just knew I wanted a companion, honestly, more so than anything. And I love a smush face. I have a Persian cat too, so we have a smush face family.
I'm a smush face person too.
So that was where my love of dogs started, was really with my first dog, Duchess, and my love of bulldogs. And
she was a rescue, right?
She was sort of like some guy was getting rid of her. It wasn't a breeder. It was just sort of like the thing.
Yeah, I think that there's this kind of weird, like what is a rescue dog? And I kind of think personally, if it is in a situation where, one, you prevent it from going to the shelter, or two, it's not in the best of situations, and we believe that removing it from there, is good. Kind of. I have a friend who, she goes, yeah, we were, looking for a puppy. Like, I wanted rescue, but fiance wanted to go to a breeder, and they actually went to one, and she was like, I was adamant we were not going to support, breeder. She was, I looked around and thought, I got to get this dog out of here. I gotta get him out. What am I going to do?
Right.
And they actually took 4.
Oh, wow.
And and they found homes for the other 3. And they worked with the rescue group. And, people give her like a hard time for like getting a breeder. But she was, no, he's a rescue dog. I got him out of a situation where he no longer could be and put him in one that he could be in. So I think that there's this kind of weird, like, fine line, or even thick line, I guess, of like what a rescue dog is. But I would say Duchess was a rescue. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So have this dog, don't really know what I'm doing, but just trying to figure it out, and kind of later in life as a full grown adult. And I just loved it. I loved caring for her. I loved the relationship. Just the bond was something like I had really never experienced, having only had cats, which is a whole different kind of bond. And so that was kind of where my love of dogs started.
And how old was she when you got her?
She was pretty young. She was under a year when I got her. So it was all the fun. So once we moved into our new house, some behavioral issues started popping up with our lab mix. He started getting nippy with people at the door. And honestly, I freaked out. I was just like, I've never had a dog that's bitten anybody before. I don't want to do this. I was terrified, really. And so I just started looking up aggressive dog trainers, honestly, and I'll go back to that because he really wasn't ever aggressive. But there's this fear that comes with a dog that's acting out, or not exactly being that perfect dog, not walking perfectly or whatever. We tend to, as owners, go to these extremes of like, my dog's the worst dog ever. I don't know what's happening. So I called Zen Dog, and Zen Dog came in and really helped me better understand who my dog was and why he was acting out and things like that. And I was looking for work at the time. And so I reached out to Zen Dog to see if they had any openings for someone who I was a personal assistant by trade. And I got a job there. And so I started to firsthand really get an idea of behavioral cases. Whether that be killed a dog or growled at grandma, there is this wide, breadth of behavioral issues that, especially when you're in a city like Los Angeles, you just can't have your dog doing that thing, whatever it is, whining all day long, biting a human, running after the postman. There's all kinds of things that we need fixed right away. And a lot of times we look at it like the dog needs training and they need to be fixed. When what I've really come to understand is it's a lot about the relationship between us and the dog, and what are we really communicating, and how are we communicating in that, and what tools do we have in order to better understand them and have them better understand us. And so that was a real mind shift for me. It was less of looking at my dogs like pets and more like looking at them as sentient beings that I was in a relationship with. And that might be a little woo woo for some people. But it really, for me, gets to the heart, of why I got into working with dogs. Is there's something about the energy between a human and their companion animal that I just find to be really beautiful. And one that I want to continue to help people better understand, that it isn't just a dog that you're telling to dance. You are asking something of a living being, and that living being is doing that because you take care of them. And so it's just that the back and forth of that relationship just was really interesting to me. And the way that it played out with, owners and families that had dogs that were acting out was life changing. I really recognized that a dog that has been deemed a behavioral case or aggressive, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the road for them, and it's not the end of the road for you as an owner either. And so when I had that mind shift, I then worked with the Zen dog for about 5 years. And while working there, I met with Shauna Cormack and Summer Parker, who are the board president and VP of Real Time Rescue.
And I dog is sorry, just in case people don't know.
Oh yeah,
Zen dog is
sure. Zen dog is a boarding and training facility, no longer open right now, but used to be based here in Los Angeles.
Because of COVID, or
yes,
okay,
yeah. And so as of now, they're not open, but they were a boarding and training facility that worked with all kinds of dogs, but the niche market was aggression. Or seeming aggression. Aggression can really be misconstrued. If a dog growls, then they are deemed aggressive, and that's not really fair. But so I use that term. I'm really careful about
an umbrella kind of term.
Yeah, it's an umbrella that we really probably shouldn't use as much as we do, and it shouldn't be the thing that an owner goes to first. Oh, my dog is aggressive, and now I have to be afraid of them. That to me is a stigma that I really want to help do away with. And I think that leads into that, the stigma of a rescue dog has problems. The stigma of an aggressive dog or a reactive dog or a behavioral dog is that they're damaged goods, and that you'll never be safe around them, or that you'll never be able to live your regular life. And sometimes it's not the right match. Sometimes it's not the right match for the owner, and that can be dealt with one way. But oftentimes you start to realize that if you're working with the right trainer that has the right mindset, and I bring up Steph Dioria, who did work at the Zen Dog and is Real Time Rescue's lead trainer. So we consult with her first on most of the dogs. We work with other trainers, but Steph Diorio, I formed a really solid relationship with at Zen Dog. She and I were both managers there. And so with working together with behavioral cases and families, for 5 years together, we really saw that there was a need for a bigger mind shift in the rescue community as well. Because the dogs that were maybe coming into the Zen Dog that were behavioral cases, either the owner never knew that there was any behavioral issues when they adopted them, or things popped up afterwards, after they got settled in a home or something like that. And so, but then it's like, I got to get rid of this dog. This dog growled at my mom, so now I got to give them to the shelter. And so there was this strange problem that seems like the rescue community wasn't really addressing in our opinion, So the four of us really felt like there was something we could do more.
Sorry, I'm just I love this. Sorry, I'm so into this right now. I'm smiling. It's sad, and I'm oh, you're saying such a beautiful thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, totally. Oh, I'm glad. So basically, there was really a need for us to start Real Time, and the focus before we really got resources enough to really start on word on the street and really have the ability to go that direction. We started with, the 3 dogs that we started our foster to adopt program with. One was a black pit mix that was deemed aggressive that had been in the shelter for 2 years. Another was a shepherd,
I'd be aggressive too.
Yeah, an 11-year-old shepherd mix that you couldn't touch around the neck, or she was really funny, just a little bit of a sassy lady. Had bitten before, but teeth touch skin, not not needing surgery or anything like that. And
I think that's a big thing to mention really quick is that's a huge difference in a skin to teeth to skin versus breaking skin and needing surgery. And I'm sorry, go ahead. The third dog.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and the third dog was so Lincoln was the black pit mix who had been in the shelter for 2 years, deemed aggressive, and then we had Daisy, who was the shepherd mix that again had been in there for 2 years, and a senior, like I think she was 11 or 12 by the time we got to her. And the third was a blind, deaf female pitty mix that had again been in the shelter for about a year and a half. And those were the 3 dogs that we started with. So
wow, you guys went full throttle.
Right. And I think that really speaks to who real time is and why, because it wasn't about me dogs.
Hold on one second, Caitlyn. You're breaking up a little. Sorry. I want to get all that. I'm sorry. You started doing the robot voice. I'm so sorry.
Totally. Yeah. Does that sound better?
Right after, yes. Yeah. So right after I said y'all went full throttle, and you said that speaks to real time rescue.
Yeah. So I feel like talking about how it started with those 3 dogs really gets at the heart of why real time started. We didn't want to see how many dogs we could get adopted. It wasn't about getting 100 dogs adopted. It was about taking those 3 that we knew no one else was going to work with and finding them homes. And I'm happy to tell you that all 3 of those dogs are in loving homes. There is Lincoln, the black pitty. He has got a pool of his own in acreage and his very own chair and the best dad in the whole world. Daisy
not aggressive.
Nope, hasn't bit anybody in the home. No problems with the elderly grandmother that lives there. Not a problem whatsoever. Daisy we just got a picture of her in an elf costume. I never thought somebody could dress her up, let alone rub her on her belly. And
she was the one that you couldn't touch the neck and now she's wearing.
Exactly. And now here she is getting dressed up and getting belly rubs, living the life.
She's an old lady. Go her.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then the third pit mix, Jessie, who was blind and deaf, we went through, had both of her eyes surgically removed, had her go through intense rehabilitation with a foster family. And now she lives with 5 other dogs that all have medical issues, that are seniors, in this badass house with a room full of couches, just living the life. Coming from a shelter where she lived outdoors for 2 years and was blind and deaf and didn't have anybody come look at her. So it might have, all 3 of those dogs, it took us a long time to get them adopted, but we were committed to getting them adopted from day one, and we weren't going to let them down no matter what happened. And it was much more important for us to focus on those dogs that nobody else was really taking under their wing, and not the 10 easy dogs that we could pull from the shelter. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about the pulling and, speaking for the dogs that were really going under the radar. And a lot of that is behavioral, so working with the right trainer and finding the right match in a human that can understand that, for Daisy, for instance, we told them you can't touch her for 30 days. That's not what an owner wants to hear. But the right owner that's interested in getting a dog so that they can give them the best life is like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll follow your rules. If that means I don't get bit. And now 6 months later, I'm dressing her in an elf costume and giving her belly rubs.
Only 6 months. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So there are ways, as long as the person is dedicated. And so not everyone's fit for our foster to adopt dogs, but that's okay. We're not here to service people. We're here to serve the dogs that are in our care and make sure to find the right match for them in particular. You've got to go through a home check. We do interviews. We do multiple meet and greets. We do We set you up with a trainer if necessary. We check in on you. It's a full 30 days to adopt one of our dogs. So they're in foster with you for 30 days before they're even yours. So we've done a lot in order to make it safe for our dogs, safe for our adopters. And really at the end, you've got this great bond with this dog, and you've really saved this dog because no one else is there for that dog, just you. And I think that
you've given
the
a family, their match, their dog.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It's all about the right match, the human and the dog. It's so rarely that there's a bad dog and a bad owner. It's generally just a bad match, whether it be environment or, the number of family members or whatnot. There's always a way for us to work to find the right situation. And we're willing to wait. I mean, we've gone through hundreds of applications for one dog because we know, hey, they can't go with kids. Hey, they really need to have an indoor space of their own. Or, hey, we really need a family that's committed to doing training every week, or whatever it is, we're willing to take that extra step.
And on that note, I know there's kind of I've read like so many news articles and things like that about, I don't want to say complaint, I guess it is sort of complaint, about how hard it is to rescue a dog. I've even heard it from people I know, like, oh, I wanted to rescue a dog, but they wanted so many things to be checked off, or I didn't hear back from them.
Yeah.
Within 48 hours, I heard back from them, like 2 weeks later. And so it's just kind of, I think that it just kind of needs to be thrown out there. And because it's Google, it's a top Google search. Why is it, why do rescues make it so difficult to get a dog? That's why, guys, like whoever's listening right now and you're thinking about adopting your dog, and maybe you submitted an application and you see this dog, a picture that you think is your perfect dog, and why aren't they getting back to you? So you're Googling, why is the rescue not getting,
Yeah,
that's why.
Totally.
And just know that if you're meant to have that dog, you will get it. And if a rescue says, hey, you're not a match for that dog, there's a reason. They know these dogs. There's a reason that it's so hard to adopt certain dogs. Some of them, like, honestly, my last dog, they were kind of like, you want her? Yeah, sure, you can have her. She's great. She's a dog-friendly dog. She had no issues, but yeah, so just anyone who's out there, and Caitlyn, you can kind of touch more base on this. It's the whole like idea of like, oh, it's rescues are making it too hard, to adopt the dog.
Right.
That's everything you just explained is why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's, I think that's a valid question. And I think that I think there is this understanding, legally dogs are property, right? That's legally, that's how it works. But we've sort of turned dogs into much more than that, right? So it's, right. There's companionship, there's love, there's that bond. There's also dogs that are like an accessory, or, to teach your kids how to, pick up dog poop and have responsibilities. There's many reasons that you bring a dog into your home, but I think that it's really important for people to start thinking about a dog not as a piece of property, but as a sentient being that's in your home and sharing your space with you. And for that reason, if you can flip the switch and not just see a dog as an animal that you're feeding, but really think about how you're in relationship with one another, that will start to tell you why rescues are so particular, because oftentimes the dogs that they've pulled have come from a bad situation. They don't want them to be returned. They don't want to tell you, hey, this dog's really great. You take the dog and then you get the dog in your home and you realize, oh, I can't handle this. Then the dog comes back. All of that is traumatic for a dog. You know what I mean? We don't want to have just a dog going into any home. All of a sudden, we didn't do your house check. You had a small hole in your fence and now the dog is missing. There's all these things that people think, oh, there's just all these rules. And each rule that a rescue has you sign or follow, I guarantee you there's a story why they added that to their adoption contract or to their list of hoops you have to go through in order to get a dog from them. And it just might, really seem like, hey, I just want to go to a breeder and just get a dog and it'll be quick. There is something really cool about getting a rescue dog because you know what you're getting. And so I will tell you, having worked with, in a boarding and training facility that worked with aggressive dogs, it doesn't matter if they're a rescue. It doesn't matter if they're from a breeder. So much more of that has to do with the way in which you're interacting with your dog and how your relationship with them is and the tools that you have to work on things with them. It's less about that it's a pit bull or that, it knew its mom or, it got raised, in a really wealthy household. Those things in my experience, they just don't matter. A dog is a dog. And you're going to have to work on your relationship with them no matter what. And the more that you can learn that from the get-go, the more understanding you might be to those who are currently the dog's caregiver. They really want what's best for the dog. And they need to make sure you're not a crazy person. I mean, how many crazy people do we all know out there in the general public? So, I just, implore people to be patient. And I think it's a more rewarding experience when you really get to learn more about a dog and what their likes and dislikes are before they come into your home.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I love that you said that with rescue dogs, you know what you're getting. And the reason that kind of like really went in my head is because you actually read the opposite. And in many like, news articles or, there's like lists of like 10 signs that, you shouldn't adopt this dog at shelter. And we can get into that like that's a whole rabbit hole. But, just kind of like, you don't, here's, just for rescue dogs, you don't know what you're getting, happy, this and this. And that's so false. Yeah, all of that is so false. Yeah, if anything, really, with a rescue dog, like you're getting more information because so many people have worked with them. And, people want to say like, oh, well, I know like the genes and of the dog. Unfortunately, with a lot of breeders nowadays, you don't know the genes of the dog. They could just have two dogs sitting next to them and say, that's the mom and dad. And they came from, Timbuktu, where else,
Right. I'd argue that just because you know the parents of a dog, that dog's going to be a good dog. Like that's a total misconception.
I've seen a lot of really well behaved and friendly and socialized dogs. Unfortunately, have to switch homes or be put with the same people but into a different home, and that dog, ended up being either destructive, not always like aggressive, but like house destructive. No longer housebroken, fearful of certain things. And so it's definitely, I know genetics play some part into, I don't want to say behavior, but ability.
I mean, there's characteristics of.
Yeah, ability, like hunting dogs and things like that. However, in terms of like behavior and how the bond and everything, it has absolutely nothing to do with where the dog came from. And I think,
I think you have to see your dog for who they are, not who you want them to be. If you're going to get a Jack Russell Terrier, you have to know that
that was perfect.
That a Jack Russell Terrier, at Zen Dog, the behavior cases that came in, it wasn't like, oh, that's a pit bull and they're deemed aggressive. White fluffy dogs that have been on laps and been, spoiled their whole life are honestly more likely to bite you than a pit bull that is living on the street. Like in my experience, I can't speak for everybody, but I do think that those are false, they're misconceptions that keep people from adopting a dog. Or keep people from having a relationship with a dog because they're fearful. And that for me is sad for everybody because you're not really seeing the full potential for yourself or for the dog that you're looking at.
Yeah. And I love how you say you're in a relationship. That's never really that's probably, I think that's the first time I heard someone describe it that way, but perfect. I always say like bond or, life together, but you're in a relationship, that is so incredibly accurate. And, saying that then you said as well, you say a lot of really great things as well. I love the dog for who they are, not who you want them to be. We always see, especially on social media and dogs on social media, they're like, oh my gosh, I want a dog. I want a dog like Mr. Breakfast. No, you just want a dog that's for you, that will match for you and your personality. And do I want Mr. Breakfast to be this like mischievous dog that goes and wants to eat plastic bags for whatever reason and likes to knock things off the counter to just to look at me and say like, oh, yeah. No, that's who he is. Yeah. And I'm not gonna, there is no such thing as this perfect dog that people are looking for. So I think it's great.
I think that, I think that I was part of the group that wanted a perfect dog until maybe 5 years ago. And I think that having a perfect dog, especially in Los Angeles, is a really hard ask. And I feel like I've gotten a lot more real with my expectations of my animals, over the past 5 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, like we were talking about, just reframing the way you look at that bond, or that relationship. There's a lot of people that do relationship training and things, like in that nature. And for me, that really just sealed the deal. Once I started looking at my dog, for the individual that they are and the part I have in their good or bad behavior, you stop looking at them like, oh, why are you doing this to me? Like as if they're out to get you because they want to like eat your shoe. And you start to really be like, okay, what was my part in this? If I know my dog likes to eat shoes, I shouldn't have left my shoes out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Simple as that. And there's a dog, a lot of people say, oh, my dog is dog selective. And I like to say I'm people selective. Like that's not a big deal. Your dog isn't going to like everybody. Like that's just the way that it is. If you live downtown and your dog has to be in downtown LA and your dog has to be able to get into an elevator and with other dogs and pass by other dogs in the parking lot and go to a tiny dog park. And that is a lot to ask of many dogs. Some dogs are like, cool, that's what I can do. But to expect and then be upset because your dog can't do all of those things, I think puts you at a place where you're not going to actively seek solutions, which there are many, whether it's just getting hooked up with the right trainer, or, talking to your vet. Sometimes dogs are in pain and they act out and you might not know that they're in pain. There's so much more to it. And I think that getting away from, oh, this dog's just trying to ruin my life, and really start to look at like, well, what is this? How am I in this? And how are we together in this, And
stop blaming the dog. It's not just the dog. Right. Like you're doing, like there's a part being played. Even if you're not doing it, maybe, your neighbor who like does something, there's some sort of little. You may not know you're doing it, but until you talk to an expert, you're not seeing the things that you are inadvertently doing to reinforce a behavior, And I think, to bring it back to real time, for us, we kept seeing these dogs that we saw so much potential in and that were just passed over and looked past. And, they had this one bite on their record, and the bite is a serious bite. But when you hear the story, you're like, okay, well, the dog did jump into his pen and nobody was in there. And, you start to see the human error in it. You start to really see the full picture and you judge less. And I feel like with real time, it's about judging less. Just get to the point. How can we help? How are we going to help this dog find their home? How are we going to help this owner keep their dog? It's not about if I think I'm better than you or worse than you or that you're not doing it right. It's about how we get to the solution. And I think it kind of goes back to like stopping the how we were saying earlier, people just kind of like want to protect dogs and they love them. That's good. But you're going after like the wrong people for the wrong reasons. It's
oftentimes. Like, there's a big stigma that, a person who is living on the street should not have an animal. And I can understand where people come from, but I am also here to say that in my experience, there's so much more that you're not seeing if that's your opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just, again, lack of education or, the resources to really have seen something different or had that experience differently. And I feel like, real time is really looking to those, to help the most vulnerable that people, many rescues they're looking at how many dogs can I get adopted. So they go into the shelter and they're going to pick the easiest, most adoptable dogs. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't
know we need a balance. There should be a balance.
But if you're going to go to a shelter and look over this one dog for 2 years, and I get it's because you don't have the resources and you don't know how to do this, but real time is built on having the resources, having the trainers, having the access to knowledge and resources that can make that particular case and that particular dog just really have a chance, get a chance.
Awesome. And so how you mentioned that you were able to have that mind shift, that paradigm shift of how to look at, dog behavior and how you view, the relationship with the dog. And that happened through, working with Zen Dog and having your own dog experience with that. Mm-hmm. How do you think, I'm not trying to be like, how is the solution? But what are some ideas or what do you think people can do so that paradigm shift can happen? Like we as a society, even that paradigm shift can happen, but for people who don't have access to an experience with, seeing the dog transform or seeing that happen or seeing, dogs be able to change and be rehabilitated through, whatever else.
Yeah. I think that's difficult because if it was an easy 1, 2, 3, it would be fixed. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard to really say that, these are the solutions. And I think it's better to, I think the quickest way, is to just sit down for 5 minutes and think about how you interact with your dog, what your dog means to you, what you think you mean to your dog. And then look at the behaviors that maybe are not the ones that you're looking to, to change so I guess it really is like, for me, the big thing is really looking at your dog for everything they are, for the whole picture. Really look at your dog in the whole picture and look at other people and their animals and try to think of what you might not be thinking of. And that is going to help you stay humble and start to really be able to take that step into changing the way that you look at companion animals.
I like how you said, look at them as a whole instead of,
right.
So I think I kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like, look at them as for who they are and what they do, not for what you need to change, but more so like if you look at, okay, so this is my dog, Sticky, and she is usually quiet at home and she barks at people outside. Okay, so she barks at people outside. Why is she barking at people outside and not inside? So, okay, that's what she does. So I feel like if you kind of look at the whole thing as, I'll use myself for an example. My dog, Mr. Breakfast, he used to have, or still does, kind of like really used to go really bad. He started having a tendency to like plastic bags, or like plastic things, to want to rip them apart and chew them, and like he'd go look for them, and he started this behavior, and I focused so long on like, how can we stop that? How can we stop him from doing that behavior? But finally, I was looking at him one day and I thought, that's who you are. You do that behavior. When do you do that behavior? You do that behavior. Okay. And I started like charting down when he would do it. Okay. When you do that behavior, how long do you do it? What stops the behavior? What distracts you? What
Yeah.
And what were times where you don't do that behavior? And so when I started looking at when he did the behavior, it was around the time that we used to go so we moved, from an apartment to a home. Granted, admittedly, I went from 4 walks a day to 2. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at him and said, or when I looked at the whole, because he has a yard and stuff, and I said, okay, when does he do the behavior? That's just who he is. When does he do it? It was around when we went on our other 2 walks. And so I went, okay, like it was a rant. And it wasn't until I was able to just say, this is who he is. This is what he does. You know, not really more so accept it, but just kind of be like, keep an eye out for like, that's who he is. That's what he's going to do. I was actually able to figure out like why it was happening, what was causing it.
You know? Exactly.
And that's
well, it's a perfect example of you detached from terrible
ego. Not to go like too deep, you know, but like detached from like, you know, like
trying not to go too woo woo, but like right? Like how do I detach from this and really just look at this for the behavior that it is? Like I'm gonna look at it. He's not a bad dog. I'm gonna look at this behavior and start to look at when does it happen? Why does it happen? And sometimes you don't get to like such a logical end point, but most of the time you do. And there's ways in which you can start to either change that behavior or take away the stimulus or add the walks back in, or at least know that he's trying to let out some pent up, you know, feelings that he's got.
There's always something, there's a reason. Energy. Yeah. Dogs don't just do things like, I'm going to do this. And it's like, why do you? I don't know. Like, no, there's like a reason.
Right. So, you know, then when you you take a step back, you detach from it and you say, okay, cool. What am I really dealing with here? And you may say, okay, cool. I got to ask a trainer because I don't know what I'm doing, you know, but to have that openness and to really look at it like, what are all the great things that Mr. Breakfast does? And when is he happiest? And what's the way in? What makes him tick? You know, like what do we see that is going to be the positive to reinforce this new behavior? Or where is he most calm? Or you know, there's just all kinds of things that you can start to just open it up a little bit. Look at what your part is. Look at the good in your dog and see them for the ability to change and recognize that you're really their everything. You know what I mean? You're really, you're calling the shots here. So you feed them, you make sure that you take them for a walk. They don't have a lot of control over those things. So you're part of it. You know, you got.
And also I'd like to mention like maybe not even like we're saying, like look at who they are. And maybe some things won't, that like not even say like, you know, what makes him happiest, what makes him this. You could also, when you said that, like, what makes him happiest? When is he most calm? When does he do this behavior? What brings it about? And it might just be like how you mentioned, my dog doesn't like, you know, small elevators with other dogs and small dog parks. You know, they might just be a dog that likes people. And that's okay. You know, like dogs aren't these like, it's like we expect them to be these like social butterflies, but it's like, man, if you put me in like this small little room with a bunch of people that were really loud and maybe they were like roughhousing us, I'm like, I don't want to do this. You know, so
sometimes I don't know what to do in an elevator. I mean, let alone dogs are all on the same level. I mean, I lived in downtown LA myself. It's a lot to navigate. And I think that again, giving that little bit of extra understanding.
So, you sit there and go, okay, so when she is most anxious and she does, you know, this weird behavior whenever there's a large group of dogs around. Okay, my dog doesn't like large groups of dogs. And that's where you kind of put into the list of who your dog is. Like, don't say, okay, we have to acclimate her to it. There are some things you can change, like the plastic chewing.
Sure.
But some things are, okay, my dog doesn't like loud cars and things. So we can't go at rush hour. Like, that's just who she, you know, like
we don't take a walk at rush hour. And it's that little shift that all of a sudden you really are understanding your dog better. You're understanding that they have likes and dislikes and you have likes. Like, I hate to humanize it to a point where people go, I don't want to hear it, but they're, you know, they are a living part of your family, you know, whether it's just you and your dog, you know, you're a pair, you're a trio, whatever you are.
And to go like non-guru, there has been scientific evidence, physical scientific evidence of MRIs and activity of the brain that dogs like do have memory. They do have decision. It's not just, you know, like they used to say, I can't remember the exact terms of, okay, you have to give them the option to go here, to go here. No, they're able to go, don't go there, or do I want to go there? You know, so for all like to make it not like how you're saying, like woo woo, I love that term. for the scientific people out there, there has been evidence that there is that intelligence, there is that emotion, and that memory and understanding of so much more than a lot of people give them credit for. And so if you just kind of sit there and say like, okay, well, look at who I am. My name is Liz. I enjoy like this, and this. I feel like I am most comfortable here, here, here. I am not comfortable here. So like, how horrible would it be if somebody was like, oh, you're not comfortable there? Well, we're going to make you like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a simple example of like just bare bones. And then you can take it from there is if you get a bulldog, they're not going to be your 3-mile hiking buddy. That's just not physically possible for them. And so, you start to look at things like that. That's not the type of dog you would get if you're a really active person. And, if you've got a Mastiff and you have a studio apartment, that might not be the best setup because you just don't have the space. There are all kinds of things that go into and set the tone of that relationship. And in addition to that, like not only just really looking at your dog, I think also taking the pressure off of being a perfect dog owner or having a perfect dog and recognizing that there's a community of people that have not perfect dogs. And there is a community of trainers that are there to help you. And there's a community of rescues that are looking to give you the resources that you need in order to have that best relationship. And I think that's so really important. I know a lot about dogs and
audio, sorry.
So I didn't. Oh no, that's okay, please, because I can't hear it. So
so I think that is most important, and then it kind of cut off.
So I think it's most important for owners to recognize that there are resources out there and there's more knowledge. I came in not knowing anything, and just a little bit of knowledge shifted my perspective and actually made me want to know more. Because if that was this feeling I had after just one change in thought about my relationship with this dog, then I wanted to know more. And all of a sudden, if you open yourself up and you say, hey, I'm not a perfect dog owner, even if you've had dogs for 30 years, there's always a chance that there's something new to be learned here. And if you can, again, stay humble and start to really see how you fit into the picture, you start to realize, well, maybe I'll reach out to this trainer because I just want a more enjoyable walk. Like, how do I make that possible? Or maybe I'm going to reach out to this daycare because I'd really like my dog. My dog loves going on play dates with this other dog. I think they need more socialization. Be open to looking to others in your community. Without the education and the community, I find real-time signs that nothing's possible. It's so much harder to do it on your own. And it's so much harder to do it in an environment where you think you're alone. And so I feel like Real-Time Rescue really decided that we weren't going to let these dogs and these people stay there. And instead, it was our job to educate and to be there as a source of knowledge and support and non-judgmental to just help everybody live their best life. And I feel like a dog and a human living their best life is totally possible, even if your dog has bitten another dog or a human before. We bark at every neighbor. There is this really best life possibility for everyone involved, even the ones that everybody doesn't think could possibly have a happy ending. So I feel like that for me is what Real Time's always been about and will always be about, no matter what program we're talking about.
And what's really great is, and I'll cut this part out, we'll kind of go into best life, so I don't want to keep you too long. So I'll basically kind of talk about how how you guys are helping these dogs that kind of nobody wanted, but now they're living this best life, and we'll go into kind of get you stripes and things like that. Okay, cool. Sure. And so what's really great with Real-Time Rescue is you guys are taking these dogs that nobody wanted, and were overlooked and things like that, and kind of helping them become the dogs that they are and they can be, and matching them with the people that can give them that and give them that best life and be happy together. And all of a sudden they're taking their dog for a walk in an elk costume, and somebody's, who is thinking about getting a dog, they see that dog, they're like, oh, where did you get that dog? Things like that. And so I think it's really great. That's why I love that Best Life and Real Time are working together, is because we have our two missions kind of merging, and you guys are taking these dogs that nobody wanted and you're transforming them to these dogs that people do, did and do want. And so now, we merge over into Best Life, and we have our 2 white stripes symbol for rescue dogs, so that people can see that this happy, beautiful, playful, like healthy, just all around like great dog, and these that are happy, making these people so happy, they can actually just visually see that, oh, that's a rescue dog. And, automatically, kind of like you said, when you learn that little bit and you want to learn more, that's kind of the hope for Best Life, is to, get that little inspiration going of like, that's a rescue dog. And then it kind of ignites that little flame or that spark of like, wanting to learn more, about dog rescue, about dog behavior. And so hopefully that kind of transforms into a whole nother community of what we call the Stripe Squad. And so Caitlyn, I know that, I won't talk too much about the 2 white stripes, but if you could do me a favor and just kind of give your opinion on like Best Life merging, working with the rescues and what it could accomplish, with the 2 white stripes symbol could accomplish for rescue dogs. Sure. And as far as like social media purposes, if you could just say like, like it's not like, don't talk to me, like talk to somebody saying, and then say Best Life instead of you or something for me.
Sure.
Here, I'll do this. What do you think the 2 white stripe symbol will do for dog rescue? Like, what do you think having a symbol for rescue dogs will do?
So I think the fact that Best Life is creating this community with the 2 stripes for a rescue dog is really important, because it highlights rescue dogs living their best life, which is totally possible.
Shoot, sorry, audio. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Okay. No, that's fine. I hope it's on my hair or something.
I know I keep like thinking that like it's like rubbing on my, like my earbuds or something, so I keep trying to push it away. All right, so I'm sorry.
But just stop me anytime, because I can't really hear myself. So Real Time Rescue is really excited about Best Life 2 stripes for a rescue dog, because we think that it'll bring the attention that all the rescue dogs aren't. Okay, let me start over. Okay.
So thank you for the question. What do you think the 2 white stripes, goodness, now I can't, here we go. What will the 2 white stripes symbol for rescue dogs? What do you think it will do for the rescue community?
Real Time Rescue loves the fact that Best Life has come up with this 2 stripes to show support for rescue dogs and to build the rescue dog community, because it really shines light on some of these beautiful souls that are just passed over. It's going to show in a real way that there are tons of dogs out there that have been rescued. And I would argue that there's probably more dogs out there that are rescued than that come from breeders. And when you see a super well-behaved, full bred Labrador walking great on leash, and you see those 2 stripes, you're going to be like, wow, look at that dog living its best life. Probably didn't come from the greatest life to start with. And that doesn't really mean that the sky isn't the limit for you. And I feel like bringing any awareness to a group that has a stigma against it, whether people think a rescue dog might have lots of problems or never walk well on leash or have medical issues or just be seen as a problem, you're going to start to really see in real time these 2 stripes for all these dogs that really have found their best match and might have come from a not so great place, and now they're living their best life.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Awesome. I love it. And then let's see. Oh man, I think I'm just going on questions of like what I just want to talk to you about.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Yeah, double check and see if you guys want to talk about anything. No.
Is there anything else for you?
Conversation. Because I liked how you said rescue groups aren't really able to, we're not really focusing so, it's like, we're kind of on like, what was it? Sorry.
No, that's okay.
It was something like the rescue groups were not really like, as a rescue community, you know, we're kind of only focusing on, man, it kind of made me think like, pet ownership or pet relinquishment and owner surrender isn't really a topic that's focused on because, in rescue. And we kind of like, it was kind of mentioned or whatever. And it thought in my head, like as far as, you know, we're not really, oh man, I wish I wrote it down. And I remember thinking that might be a whole different conversation. Because it was like, what made me think was, like what made me think of it was, you know, pet ownership and or pet relinquishment, owner surrendering, isn't really kind of talked about as a major issue of, you know, a problem and kind of a cause of, you know, shelter overpopulation. I feel like a lot of the focus has kind of shifted towards like backyard breeders and bad breeders, which not saying that they're not bad, you know, but it was interesting to hear that because it's almost kind of a little thought that I've always had in my head of, you know, are backyard breeders producing more dogs that go into the shelter, or is it actually like owner surrender? So what problem should we really be tackling first? Is it, you know, backyard breeding, or is it more so educating people and changing that paradigm shift of you don't get rid of a dog, you know, you don't.
Well, so I can speak to that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think that a lot of the rescue community does focus on backyard breeding situations, stray dogs, that type of thing. And something that we don't talk a lot about, and I think it's because there's a lot of shame involved and judgment is owner surrenders or owner relinquishments. And that really speaks to Real Time's rescue's cause, because if we can step between someone relinquishing their dog to the shelter, we can save a dog from going into the shelter and possibly getting, you know, being more traumatized, having more behavioral issues, coming out more afraid of people and other dogs. If we can step in between an owner relinquishment and the shelter system, we've done a lot of good. And maybe it's just for that one dog. People like to think, well, I saved a hoarding situation, so there's 20 dogs that have been saved. But if we can save just that one life for Real Time, that's really what it's all about. So looking at the, you know, backyard breeders is definitely something that needs to be dealt with. But Real Time feels that standing between the owner relinquishments has been really successful.
It almost sounds like you guys are wanting to prevent owner relinquishment because we don't we're on the street, but like kind of sort of.
Like, you know, so for instance, I think that, you know, owner surrender gets a really bad, it has a bad stigma, right? Because you gave up on your dog. You don't want your dog. How could you do that? How could you just bring them to the shelter? You know, there is very little understanding. And in some cases, you know, people don't have anywhere else to turn, or, you know, I try not to get too stuck in why somebody got rid of their dog. However, if I can meet that person before they get to the shelter system, there's a chance for me to do some real good there. And that's someplace that Real Time has seen a lot of success. So I'll give you a quick example. There were 2 dogs under 2 years old. Their names are Buddy and Bella, and they were living outdoors near in the Morongo Basin area. And their owner called the shelter and said, "What happens if I bring you my 2 dogs?" And they said, "Well, we'll most likely euthanize them because we're overcrowded." So she hung up and she called her vet and she said, "What does it cost for me to euthanize both of my dogs?" And the vet, who had a relationship with Real Time, called Real Time and said, we're not going to euthanize these dogs, but we gave them your number and we're hoping they reach out to you. So the next day, the daughter of the woman who made the initial call reaches out to our founder and says, I just moved home. My father was diagnosed with with Parkinson's 6 months ago. My mother was just diagnosed with fibromyalgia. We're barely keeping things together. And she called the shelter. They told her that they were going to put her dogs down. And she thought it would be a better option if that's what had to happen. It would be a better option for her to do it humanely herself at the vet that she knows. And so by stepping in the middle of that, we not only educated a woman into that there's something else. We took them into our rescue, and now they're in foster homes awaiting adoption. And that is something that saved 2 dogs, not only just from being euthanized, but also not from going to the shelter, and simultaneously educated a whole family that those aren't your only options, and that there are good people out there that will help. And I'm not going to judge you because you have to get rid of your dogs. You've got to put your health and well-being first, and you're not able to give these dogs the life that they deserve. And you recognize that, and you reached out for help, you got some knowledge, and now your dogs are in these amazing homes, and they'll go on to even more amazing permanent homes. So that's the type of success story that we really get jazzed about, because not only have we educated the community, we've also stepped in and made someone who thought they had a hopeless thing that they had to decide.
Like a horrible decision.
Gave them a little hope, and if we can save more dogs like that, there are, just like I mentioned Oscar earlier, he could have easily ended up at the shelter because she could no longer afford to feed him. And so if we step in and say, well, we'll give you some food, great, solved. Or if we step in and say, hey, it's okay, give us your dog, we will help. That's also shouldn't have a stigma. If you can't keep your dogs, it doesn't make you a bad person. And you may just not understand what options are out there for you. And you may not realize what happens. You just think, oh, I'm going to give my dog to the shelter and somebody else is going to find them a home. And you don't recognize how much damage a dog can happen to a dog when they're in the shelter. So if we can step there in the middle, we really feel like that is maybe a little harder, but it really pays off.
And you touch base on 2 really good points there with, so I've always thought that if we can so there are the situations where they can't help surrendering the dog, and there should be no judgment. They should not be made to feel bad. They are not bad people. And then unfortunately there are those situations where people just get rid of them, because they're old or because they're, having a baby or something like that. And so do you think that if there's almost kind of like a mixture of education of the resources available and to prevent, owner surrender, like letting them know that's not the only option in terms of like providing food, there's resources to provide medical care and behavioral training and things like that. And then, so the education of that, but also the education of, the rescues being out there as well, instead of just automatically surrendering them, and the rescues being out there and the non-judgment to it when in situations where you can't help it like that. But then there's also kind of like another level where it needs to be almost kind of like educated, or like this like mindset of like, man, I had it too. Damn it, it was so good. And it's such like a sensitive topic. So you have the people that they have to get rid of it. They have to surrender. They should know the resources of not just going to the shelter. That's not their only option. The rescues can help them. There's the people who, we prevent surrendering because they need to learn. So almost the education of the resources out there, to not have to surrender your dog. And then almost going into another level of the education and that paradigm shift of you don't just give up your dog, of this like kind of almost like as a society, not the judging and shaming, but more so of don't get the dog if you're going to have to do that, kind of thing. Like you said, having that relationship, it's not property, And so I think that a lot of rescues and even, Humane Society, not that they're doing anything wrong, there's not a lot of focus on educating those 3 levels to either prevent or reduce the amount of dogs in the shelter from owner surrender. because 48% of dogs that are in the shelter are due to behavioral issues. And so you add them up, 72% of dogs are in shelters because of owner surrender. No judgment, whether it is like a judgy situation or or not.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just
that's
fact.
just the truth. Yeah. And so do you almost think that if we educate on those three levels and kind of put a little more focus into that and like still, battling back the breeder thing, it's almost, I've always wondered if we did that and more like real-time stuff that you guys are doing, like real-time rescue and those three levels of education, if we could actually even see an extreme drop in dogs in shelters and homeless dogs and overpopulation.
I would think so. I mean, as far as, I think it's important what you're saying as far as when you decide to bring a dog into your home, you should be honest with whether or not you can handle the responsibilities of having a dog in your home. I do think that people, get puppies for Christmas and they think it's going to be great. And, they're not really entering into dog ownership with their eyes wide open. And that I think is really, really important in changing, again, that paradigm shift of really having, really looking at how do we make it so that our shelters are not packed up to begin with. I do think that might be you really need a coordinated effort in order to hit all three of those levels. You need a community and I feel like, Shauna and Summer from Real Time Rescue are really more of our, like they'll be able to give you better sound bites for that type of thing. But the thing that I always hear from the two of them as far as the shelter situation and rescues and how do we really deal with the overall problem that we're all working towards, which is making sure the dogs don't end up in the shelter, or if they're in the shelter, they don't stay for long and no dog is in a shelter. No dog is put down. Those are the overarching goals of all rescues, of all humane societies, of all shelters, of all trainers, of, everybody's on the same page. So if there's a concerted effort and a real sense of community that we're all in this together, I'm not fighting you to pull that dog. Like we need to work together as a dog loving community to really say, hey, if I know a friend and they're getting a dog, I'm going to actually talk to them about what it means to own a dog. And when my kid gets a dog, I'm going to actually talk to them about the ins and outs of what it means to be responsible for a dog. And what if you go to college? Let's start really looking at dog ownership as
a lifetime,
a gift. This is not just something that you should be. It's not a right to own a dog. Like you have to be able to do the things that they need in order to take care of this dog and do it responsibly and safely. There's still a living animal with teeth in your home. It's important to really look at what you're doing. I think that that's probably the hardest level to get in on. I think that educating and one person at a time is where we're at. And we really need to all work together. Real Time is taking some of the behavioral dogs. Another rescue is taking senior dogs. One rescue is taking, all pit bulls.
This life is showing people how cool it is to rescue. No, I'm just kidding.
But that's the thing is like everybody's doing their own little part. And the more everybody does their own little part is how we're going to deal with the problem to begin with. But there's really needs to be a concerted effort by everyone involved to sort of let their own thing go and look at the bigger picture of how do we solve this problem. And I do think that you're right. There's that level of general understanding of what it means to own a dog and the repercussions of what happens when you own a dog and you do or don't take care of it. And as well as what the options are that are out there if you do run into a problem and you want to keep your dog, and that there's options out there if you got in over your head and you can no longer do this. And I think that having the understanding there, I know many rescues and I understand why they don't take owner surrenders. There's just a lot more baggage there. There's just a lot more going on. And I'm always so thankful that Real Time does because it gives you a deeper understanding of the problem. Some people got a dog, they shouldn't have, they're in over their head and now they don't know what to do. And that's okay. Like,
they're
it's
not
okay.
bad people.
Everybody,
Yeah, they're not
right.
bad people. They made a mistake. Like, how many times have how many times have you ordered a pizza and been like, I'm going to eat all of this, and you don't?
Exactly. So like, it's just one of those things where I'm really glad to be able to work with those owners that are in over their head and let them see that there are communities out there that are there to help them and to really give them a light at the end of the tunnel, because we're all in this together. And if we all want what's best for the dogs, then, that's just what we do.
Yeah, I love that, because I've usually always thought like education is the main thing. Education, like, and then different forms of education, because nobody likes to be lectured. Nobody wants to sit there.
Right.
Dog ownership is this, and this is why you should rescue. Kind of thing. Like, like it needs to be, and that's kind of the goal of Best Life, is almost like make dog rescue like sexy, cool, fun. Like what we want to, kind of thing. And so there's all those levels of, and all of us working together. But I love how you said that the community is really the big answer. And a community is in like rescues working together, shelters working together, but also, awareness, like education, like, Best Life and the Real Bovins, all of that, like awareness, education, like bringing them to them. And then on top of that, there's even the people who have rescue dogs and, have that community and that support. And it almost kind of all stems around that no judgment zone.
Mm-hmm. And you're not alone, that's something that really, working at ZenDog and starting Real Time, the coolest part about that is all the people that I've met along the way that are in the same situation, being able to connect two owners that have dogs that don't walk well, and setting them up so they can go on a walk together and be there for each other is beautiful. I mean, all of a sudden, these people who felt they had no hope and that they, couldn't take their dog anywhere, if they've got a buddy. And it's the same thing in rescue. If you're working with a dog and you have a foster dog and they're terrible on a walk, and that they really like hanging out with that other dog, go on a walk together. Like, it's one of those things where you start to really see that you're not in this by yourself. Whether that means you're going to keep your dog or you're going to get rid of your dog, you're just not alone. Like, it's really important that people not feel that they got to do it all by themselves. And there's always a better way to look to your communities for more. And, just to bring it home, I feel like word on the street, that's really what it's all about too. It's just that we're here. You don't have to do this by yourself. It doesn't have to be that hard.
It's really awesome. I love that. I'm glad we got into that, because I was like, it might be like a whole deep rabbit hole type thing. That was really awesome. And Caitlyn, thank you so, so much. It was just, I loved our conversation. It was a really, really just kind of in-depth, like I think it was very productive. And again, for anyone watching, anyone listening, Real Time Rescue is based out of Los Angeles, and they have the Word on the Street program. Please do consider donating, whether donating monetarily or Amazon wish list, gift items, or even, like she said, there's a whole list of ways that you can help out, either Real Time, Word on the Street, or their partner shelters. All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much
for the opportunity. It was really great to talk to you.
Of course. And I look forward to Real Time Best Life, like working more together and getting to talk to you guys some more.
Definitely.
I have to come volunteer with you guys. I'm in San Diego, so
please.
I'll keep in touch.
Well, come on up.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, sweetie. Have a great day.